Welcome back, and welcome for the first time to painting class. It's very exciting because now, if you'd like to, you have the opportunity to participate, to follow along with me as I share the wonderful, exciting adventure that is acrylic painting. So, let's get into it. Things you will need: brushes, rags, Bristol paper, which is thick paper, get the thickest one you can, and or canvas, tape, palette paper or some sort of palette. This is like a waxed paper. And of course, paint. Also water, which I have in a little squirt bottle, but you can also just do a little cup of water. Also, keep your hair out of your face and wear clothes that you can get messy in. So I've got my fun little mechanic outfit. And I could wear gloves, but acrylic paint uses plastic and is water soluble, so it's not as toxic as oil paint. You never want oil paint to seep into your skin because your skin is porous. It's not as much of an issue with acrylic paint, but if you have like a catering job or you need to work with your hands after or go to a meeting and you want paint all over your hands, it's always best practice to wear gloves. But I'm okay with getting a little messy today because I'm just in the studio. So what we're going to go over today is setting up your palette, using your brushes. I'm going to use the demo for my painting in the figure class as a way to help you learn about how to push the paint around. So what we're going to be doing is a grayscale and also painting different flesh tones. And then I'll show you how to properly clean up and dispose of hazardous materials with your paint. So that's what we're up to today. Okay, let's get started. P.S. I almost forgot something very important. You also will need palette knives. Palette knives are very important for mixing to get that even color, and the paint brushes are for applying to the surface you're going to paint on. Generally not the best idea to mix your palette colors with your paint because your brush is just way less efficient at getting a consistent color than your palette knives. Can be useful for doing specific painterly effects, but in a beginner class like this, use your palette knives. What I want to talk to you about before we really get into it is thinking about talent. Talent is just a pursued interest. There are people that have a natural affinity for something, but if you don't put in disciplined, consistent practice on it, that doesn't really amount to anything. If I can do it, you can do it, as long as you're willing to practice. So, let's practice. Okay, so what we're going to be doing to start is mixing gray and brown. We're going to mix 3 different kinds of brown, but we're going to start with gray so that we can get a good grayscale going on our paper. And I'll show you how to stair step down from lightest to the darkest color on your grayscale. And then I'm going to show you how to mix flesh tones with 3 different kinds of brown. Now the difference between mixing gray and mixing brown is a small one. With each of them, you mix the primary colors together. So that's blue, I almost said red, yellow, and red. And the difference between gray and brown is that with gray, you skew more blue, and with brown, you skew more red and yellow, which is to say, orange. To get brown, in general, you can combine the 3 primary colors, or you can combine 2 complementary colors. But that's kind of the same thing because complementary colors such as green and brown, green is yellow and blue. So in some way, shape, or form, you are always mixing the primary colors together. I had a student in my class say that you can also get brown by mixing orange with black, which is true because brown is just dark orange, hot take. So if you ever have a kitchen with beautiful brown walnut floors, then baby blue cabinets will probably look pretty good because those colors are going to vibrate because they're complementary on the color wheel. So we're going to start with gray. So a couple things with acrylic paint. I use Golden. That's my favorite brand. I've tried lots of stuff. Not sponsored yet. Golden, sponsor me. Liquitex is also fine. Try to upgrade from the student grade paints if and when you can afford it. But there's I'm using fluid as well as a mix of heavy body golden acrylics. I just think it's, pretty solid. More and more I'm getting into the fluid ones. I like these tall bottles with the squirt. It's easier to control and clean up and stuff. So always start with your lightest color, because lighter colors, such as yellow and white, are less dominant as opposed to dark blue and black, which is to say that when a little blue gets in yellow, that's green. But if a little yellow gets in blue, that's blue. That's because darker colors are more dominant, right? So the lighter colors, when they are influenced by another color or adulterated, then they immediately turn to a different color. And I'll show you right now. So we'll put some blue on there. Oh, also, setting up our palette. What you want to do for setting up your palette is keep all your colors on the edge and then grab from them and mix in the middle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to amend my approach right now. Put my yellow over there, squeeze that out. And whenever you need to change your palette knife, pull it off like that until it's clear, so that when you move the other color, you're never mixing it. So like what I've just done is incorrect, actually. I'm messing up, so you don't have to. And I can just wipe this off, actually, and we can try again. Hell yeah. Look at that. Slash, just use a different area. But this will dry pretty soon. Acrylic paint is different than oil paint because it will dry within, anywhere between 10 minutes to an hour, depending on how much paint you laid on and depending on the weather. But that's part of the strength of acrylic, is that you can really go layer after layer by exploiting the fact that it dries quickly, as opposed to oil paint, which has multiple days of working time. Okay, so I've got my yellow here that I pulled from my side, and I'm just gonna pull a little blue in, just a little tiny speck of blue. In fact, let's get in there. There we go. Push it around your palette knife, give it a nice little hold with your index finger. Is that the index finger? Pointer finger, for some control, and see how that's already a pretty healthy green, right? It's a very springy green. And you want to mix it and push it around until you don't see any more streaks of blue. Now I want to mix in a little red. So we're going to add, again, we're going to pull the paint off of our brush, add the red to the edge of the palette, in case we need more later. Any excess can go back in if it's uncontaminated, right? You want to save as much paint as you can because paint is expensive. I'm going to pull in some red, pretty healthy amount of red. So I'm pushing that around, and that's going to get to a pretty good brick red, right? I could add a little more yellow to this and turn it to a pretty good solid brown. So the three primary colors, that's how you get brown, giving precedent to putting more yellow in there. Now, but I want this to be a gray / black, and then I can work down. So I'm going to go try to get a true slate gray. So in order to do that, all I have to do to this mix, again, I'm pulling off of my palette, off my knife. I'm going to pull in all of my blue. The more blue we put in, the more black it will appear. And now, when you're trying to zero it out and neutralize the color, if it's skewing one way, so I can see right now this is skewing green, all you have to do is add in the complementary colors. Now there are 3 complementary color pairs. There's always one primary paired with one secondary. So complementary of blue is orange, complementary of red is green, and complementary of yellow is purple. Purple is probably the hardest color to mix, just depending on the hue of red and blue that you have, because there are crimson reds, there are cadmium reds, there's naphthol reds, and then on blue there's so many. There's like ultramarine, and there's phthalo red shade, phthalo blue shade. So I find that the best way to get purple is with ultramarine and magenta, actually. So I'll show you that later. But so now I've got this really dark green, but I need it to be more gray. So we're going to introduce some red. And now it's looking a lot warmer. So I think think it's looking more brown, so I'm gonna put some more blue in there. Just push all the rest excess off and pull free. Put this in there. A little more blue. Get that in there. And so what I'm gonna do is just mix back and forth until I get my true gray. And I'll know it's gray because when I put white in it, it will be a very concrete-esque neutral gray. Okay, so that's pretty good. So I'll test it now. Adding in a little white again. I'm gonna put it on the edge. And I'm gonna use a different palette knife actually, because I'm gonna keep mixing with this one. So I'm gonna use my second palette knife. And this is dry, and I could shave it down all the way just down to the metal. But for now, just know that I'm not mixing in a dirty color. So I'm gonna grab a lot of white, and what I'm gonna do is pull it over here and just add a little bit of the gray to it. You always wanna start with acrylic with the lighter color, and then introduce a little bit of the darker color. And also keep in mind that acrylic will always dry one shade darker than when it looks like when it's wet. So that is pretty important to keep in mind. So I'm just gonna push most of my color off of here, and even just what's left on my palette knife is gonna be strong enough to turn this white into a gray. Watch this. Watch it, really get in there. There we go. Okay, so that's pretty good. That's a pretty good neutral gray color. It's not really skewing too red or too yellow or too blue. You could maybe say that it's skewing a little blue, but I'm actually pretty happy with that. So now we're gonna pull it over to my actual palette. And for aesthetic's sake, I am going to put some tape on it, but that's not required by any means, you know. You don't have to make it look all nice, but I'm gonna put down some tape. And I'm not gonna push it down too much. I'm gonna try to get a good edge, but I don't want the tape to pull off. Generally, you want like a lower adhesive tape if you're working on paper. If you're working on canvas, it's totally fine because it's woven together, but you can rip the paper if you pull off the tape too aggressively. So I'm gonna tape off this whole thing into a little fun grid and then apply the paint. Maybe I'll just do a little time lapse. Now I'm ready for brush time. So I've got my colors over here. I'm gonna go in, so I've mixed my mid-tone to a color that's consistent. And I'm just gonna start on this left side. I think we'll do this one second to lightest. So you always wanna pull away from the tape, because if you push into the tape, it's gonna get under the tape and you're gonna ruin your nice little cute tape line. So just away towards the center into the square, even pressure. Yeah, and you can do as many coats of this as you like until it's completely opaque, which is to say solid or flat, right? So I'm pulling away, controlling the brush, not going too crazy. I'm not gonna get paint on any of my other squares. So if I do, I have to start over. Just kidding. Now here's the thing with brushes. So when you've used a brush and you need to use it for a different color, the first thing you wanna do is you always wanna pull all of your paint off of it. So pull it all the way off, right? And then what you wanna do is I'm gonna take some of my water and I'm gonna put it on here. And I'm just gonna push in there, right? You can see it's light gray, but you can see there's more pigment coming off. Pull more of it off. Pull all of your paint off before it ever gets near the sink. And then what we can do is we can go to the sink. I'll have a bucket in the sink, and I'll do more brush movements at the end. But you brush it in with soap, and then rinse it out with a bucket that will not go down the drain, because we don't put paint down the drain. And at the very end, you're just mixing your soap. You're rinsing your clean brush in the tap. That's how we do it. So, continuing. I've got this pretty good square. I think what I want to do is generally it's better to stair step down from the lighter color. So I'm going to go in more my lightest color, my white. Just take a little bit of this other color. Oh, and actually, I'm just going to use this on my palette knife. So I'm going to go even lighter. But again, we don't want to mix with our brush. We always want to mix with the palette knife because that's how you get the most consistent color. Just press in there, don't be shy. Use the palette knife. God, years of watching Bob Ross paid off. Here we go. There. Okay, here we go. Good, it's good, it's good. Okay. So grab that. And it looks pretty white, but when it gets onto the palette, it'll be next to the, when it gets onto the surface, it'll be next to the paper, and you'll see. Away, we want to push away from the edge. So that's number one. Now we'll come back out. Now we're going to just add on our palette a little bit darker. We're going to go all the way down to get our grays. And we can just take the one we've already mixed and just add a little bit more. All right, you can see the dark already having a really dominant presence on here. Now I'm going to, for this, just add a little matte medium. Matte medium, I use a Liquitex one, right? This is paint extender, and you can also use it to make a glaze, which is where you have just a little bit of the paint and mostly the medium so that it has a transparent or semi-transparent, which we call translucent effect. And that's good for layering colors on top of each other for fun effects or extending paint if you're running out. So it's always good to have some matte medium on hand. Pull all the paint off of my brush from the other color. I could use multiple brushes, or I could run back and forth to the sink cleaning a bunch of times, but I'm confident that I'll just be able to do this as is. Because we're just getting darker every time in the same color range, so it's not so important, right? We don't have like a yellow loaded brush that we're trying to reuse for green or vice versa. That's why you always go darker in color, because it messes with your brushes less. So we'll go in again here, pull in for our cute little effect. Yeah. Good. Now you'll notice this is looking a little more blue, and this is looking a little more of a true slate gray. And so if I'm unhappy with that, I can go back in on this with another layer, and it'll look more solid. With acrylic, layering is the key, right? You're gonna show your brush strokes with acrylic, generally with one pass, and that's just a function of the material. So layering in acrylic is your friend. Don't expect to always get it right in the first try. So I'm just gonna go in again, a little more of my dark color. Go in, pulling away from the tape, controlling it. Generally hold your pen like a pencil. Unless you're doing something really big and ambitious, you don't need to do a whole saber move. It's more like a pencil. And generally, the closer you hold it here, the more control you have. The further away, the more loose it's going to be, right? Similar to using chopsticks. Try to brush out any brush strokes so you have a nice, just easy square. And now I'm just going to add in my darkest color. Put a little more in there, yeah, good. Also, there's a big difference between an out-of-the-tube black and what's called a chromatic black, which is a black that you mix. In general, my opinion is that the chromatic blacks look a lot better and they have a lot more life to them, whereas the out-of-the-tube blacks have this kind of dead look to them. It's not something you really notice unless you put them next to each other. But keep that in mind, because a dead black, if you're trying to do something special with your color palette on your painting, it can really be distracting in a way that takes you out of the visual experience, right? The suspension of disbelief. Okay, great. So now I've got a good line of color. So my grays are already done. So now I'm going to reset my palette, and we're going to move on to mixing browns. Okay, so moving on to browns and skin tones. So when you're painting, you're inevitably going to come up to the situation where you're painting diverse kinds of bodies, because we all come in different shapes, sizes, backgrounds, all of that. So you need to be able to paint people of different colors, and also in environments where their bodies are reflecting and reacting to different colors of light. So that's why we want to be able to paint blue browns, yellow browns, red browns, because you have the body with its specific, tone, and then also the light interacting with it, right? It's a two-way street. So we're going to start with our lightest color brown, the yellow brown, and then from that same base, once we finish our stair step, we can add a little red to that and make it a red-brown base, and then add more blue to it and make it a blue-brown base. That will allow us to use the most efficient use of our paint. We're going to set up our colors on the edges, and then we're going to pull them into the middle and paint here. So in starting with yellow, we're trying to shoot for like a tan. Now what I'll say here as well is that a lot of people like to buy every color under the sun. They want to buy the greens, the purples, the oranges, and you can do that. But also, the way I'm structuring this is such that you won't really need to do that because you can mix every single color from the primary colors, red, yellow, blue. You can mix anything from that. Those are the only colors you can't mix because they're your starter colors. So I'm just going to do that. So I've started with my yellow. Push that off a little more. Pull it off. Then we're going to add some red on my side here. Now the other thing here is that it's easier to get more of a gray if you use the cold primaries, because there's a cold set of primaries, there's a warm set of primaries. So if you're doing like a lemon yellow and an alizarin crimson and a ultramarine, that will give you more of a gray. But if you're going to do the warmer ones, if you're doing a cad yellow, a cad red, a phthalo blue, that's easier to get more of a brown. So keep that in mind depending on what you're doing. I think I'm using the warmer set because we're doing browns. So I've got all my colors here on the edge, and I'm going to pull them in. I'm going to use pretty much just all of my yellow since we're starting with yellow, the yellow brown. And for brown, right, we want as much yellow as possible, and then some red, and then just a little bit of blue. But if we're making something black, it's the opposite. We're going to do mostly blue. How are we looking? Yeah, I'm starting to see a tan develop. That's exactly what we want. Look at that. Ooh. So I'm going to use this as my middle tone, my starting middle tone for the yellow red, or the yellow brown, excuse me. And then I'll start with white, and I'll add just a little of the tan to it, and we'll stair step down, and then I'll add some of my chromatic black, and we'll stair step all the way down to my darkest tone. So it's like this color, but a yellow equivalent. We pretty much just made yellow ochre from scratch. So again, you can make every color from just the primaries. That's kind of the beauty of the primaries. I'm going to take my white. I'll put that on the edge as well. It's just a lot of white. Generally, you need more white and just a little bit of black, because again, black's the most dominant. Yellow is the most delicate. And now that I'm using this rag, I'm starting to get paint all over my hands, as you can see. So let's glove up, I think. Let's glove up, let's do it. Gloving up, it's the glove song. It's the song you've been waiting for all day long. Glove song. So take like half my white, I think. Oh my gosh, you see that? I pulled it right into a solid piece. Okay, it's fine. Like half my white, like a lot of white, you always see more white. And then we'll just pull just a little bit of the tan in there. And already you can see, look, not white anymore. That's okay. This is gonna be our lightest tone, pretty similar to our light gray. So if you wanna know how to make cream, voila, light brown. Pull away from my edges, an even layer on there. Don't be afraid to really apply it. You can always brush it off. Pull out any streaks. Now I don't need to rinse out my brush because I'm using the same color and we're just gonna make it a little darker, so that won't affect it. But if I went the other way, I would absolutely need to fix this. So we're gonna add just a little bit more. Yeah, let's add a little more. Yeah, good. Push it, push, 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 push. Slide, slide, slide. Push, 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 slide. Push, push, slide, slide. Okay. And, I do want to pull all this off because I don't want to be mixing on my palette. Pull in. Yeah, looks great. Looks good. And now I can pull this off again. And we can just take this as our middle color. Pull that in. Yeah, look at that, beautiful. What a nice, rich, strong color. Why did I do this? I should have started over here. What an insane thing for me to do. Oh well. Now I'll take some of my, let's push that off. Pull it off my palette. Knife. My palette knife. Good. Be careful now not to get this palette knife in my guys. And I have some of my black from over here, from my other palette. I'm gonna pull this black in, add this black down here at the edge. Ooh, that's good. And now I've got a little bit on my palette knife. I think that will be enough to give me another tone in here. So just mix this. Add a little more black. Not too much. Ooh, that's a lot. Let's pull back a little bit. Yeah, see that? The interesting thing with yellow is that when you mix yellow with black, it turns green. So you have to be careful. If it's turning green and you don't want it to look green, you want it to look brown, you have to add the complement of green, which is red. So a lot of people get frustrated with yellow because there's some science behind it where black and yellow makes green, which shouldn't make sense, but it always happens. So keep that in mind. Don't fall into that trap. Okay, I've got a good, like, not puce, because puce is more of a purple brown, but I've got definitely a good darker, oh yeah, beautiful. And I'm kind of running out of paint here, so I'm gonna add some medium to extend it. Come on, there you go. And you don't have to go crazy with the medium. You still wanna have more pigment than medium. Otherwise it will start to become transparent. And you'll start to see your brush strokes, and we don't want that. Okay. Okay, good. Good, good, good. That's more to work with. Really mix it in. Good. Yeah, brush that on strong. Oh, but look, you can see on my palette, now that I've added the medium, it does something to the color. So make sure you have enough color to start, because your medium extender will always affect it. Look at that. See if I can, yeah. Yeah. I've made this mistake, so you don't have to. On your palette, just mix enough paint. Yeah, look at that. I promise I'm competent. Okay. And now we'll just mix in more black to get that really final dark shade. And it is looking a little green, so I'm gonna add just a little bit of red in here, just to really remind it that it's a yellow, not a green. Good. Yeah, it's good. And I'll add in a little here too, since I needed this one to be a little color corrected. This is called alla prima, or mixing on your surface, wet into wet. In this case, it's good. Yeah, good. Trying to get that more even. Just kind of pull until I get kind of an even. Okay, great. Yellow brown achieved. Okay, so now we just have to add a little red to our brown base and fill out our second column with our red brown, and then add blue to that base and fill out our column with the blue. And then you'll have a spectrum of tones for mixing every kind of color. So all that we have to do now is do it. Okay, so just like that, with a concerted effort, here I have a complete tonal range, starting with the yellow-brown, then I have red-brown, more of a blue-brown. You can see it gets more of a purple, and then we have a more neutral grayscale there. And what we're going to do now is take off the tape, and there is a right way to take off tape, and then I'm going to show you brush care. So what we want to do is find our tape. Okay, and we're going to zoom in here and be delicate, because what we need to do is usually you want to pull away from the tape. Usually what you want to do is pull away from the paint, but because I have two sides, I'm just going to very gently pull at more or less a 45-degree angle. And I'm not going to pull too fast. I'm just going to give it an even pressure and just pull and just go all the way down. And maybe I'll even come in here and hold the surface more as I'm pulling the rest of it, right? See the rest of my little snail trail here. Pull out. Yeah, good. And then I have a nice even line. So, oh my goodness. What we're going to do now is do that to this whole range. You want to be careful, respect the paint, just slow and steady. And then we're going to get a nice, perfect set of reference tones that we can always refer back to. And I can even write on the side here that this is the yellow brown, this is the red brown. And you can write little notes to yourself on how you mixed these so that later you can come back and refer to those for future paintings, because it's nothing more frustrating than not having, you know, the formula that you need for the type of project you're trying to do. So now I'm on the edge, so I'm pulling away from it. And even here, the tape is starting to break a little bit, but that's okay. What I don't want to do is rip and pull the paper off. So we're just going to gently, even pressure, do the satisfying tape pull off. Oh my gosh, so tacky, literally. Okay. Oh, see that? It's starting to pull. Be careful. You can see some of the paper is coming off. That's what happens when you press too hard. Okay, so I've got, you can see it's pulling the tape, so we're actually gonna try coming from the other end. And again, we're not pulling too hard, we're going at more or less a 45-degree angle, trying to sneak up on the material. Oh, and in fact, I've even done so, I've even pulled it off the tape that I had initially. Okay, so look at this, sad little guy. Pull some of this paper material off. That's why it's good to have a low adhesive or low tack tape for working on paper, especially. I'm gonna maintain this 45, sneak after it. Go. Look how satisfying that's starting to look. Got one more. Let's just speed this along a little bit. Now we notice that the squares all look pretty crisp. Again, that's because we're pushing away from the tape line. If I had wanted to make them even more crisp, you can see there's a little bit of fuzzy lines there. But what I could have done is used more, just kept going at it and used more, not water per se, but you know, if I had more fluid paint, then it spreads easier and wetter. Okay, so now when you have just one area touching the paint, you want to pull it a 45 away from the tape. So I'm doing something like this. And I want to hold near it because that will be better for the paper. So now you can see lovely squares. All right, so taking off the tape and now perfect grid. Now you'll notice with this that with a lot of these colors you can see the brush strokes, and that is just a function of the paint body itself If you want these to be really flat, you just have to go back in with a second layer. Not so necessary with this exercise, but if you're doing a large-scale painting and you're not wanting the brush strokes to show, you just have to go in with another layer. So I'm pretty happy with this. I might even go in and label these later for my own reference. But now we can move on to a very important aspect of your practice, which is brush maintenance. Cleaning your brushes at the end so that you don't have to shell out paying for expensive brushes over and over again, right? If we take care of our materials, we take care of our resources, then we can use them for a very long time. It's good to be stewards of our environments, of our resources, taking care of our own bodies even. It's all important. So let's head over to the sink. Okay, so at my sink, I have a bucket of paint water that I keep in here. This is what I'm generally going to put my rinsing in. So you always want to push the paint out of the brush by tapping it against the bottom. And then once I see that all my pigment has more or less pushed out, I'll pull all the water off. And again, this is never going to go down the drain. This always goes outside after in my hazardous waste bucket. And then I also have a small thing of brush soap in here. You can also just use dish soap in a container like this. But if you want to spend more on the brush soap, it's meant more for bristles. So I'm going to push in here. And there's a bit of pushing soap on it. So just going back and forth, pulling away from the metal part of the brush. There's a name for it, and I forgot. Don't at me. Stem or something. Just make sure you really got all the soap in there. You don't see any more pigment coming off of there. That's when you know that your brush is clean. And again, this is the brush soap. Pull it off. Pull this off. Get this in here. And then I might even, again, take my rag, just pull everything else off of here until we know that this brush is reset. And then when you put the water on and rinse it, there should be no pigment coming out. Should be just soap coming out of it, going down the sink. Look at that, nice and clear. As Bob would say, there. So the last thing to do is I have this bucket of paint water. I have an orange Home Depot bucket that I keep outside with a lid, And I'll keep all my paint in there until I'm ready to have the hazardous waste folks come pick it up. And then they will dispose of it in a way that does not harm marine life. That's the whole point of not putting any paint down the sink. We want to make sure that we're not putting any paint into the water supply, which then trickles out to the ocean. We want to lead by example, right? We want to be sustainable with the way that we conduct ourselves with our practice. So that is how we do it. Class dismissed.